Welcome back to Road Gang Radio. Join Jimmy Mack and Lindsay Lawler's Gang of the Airwaves by subscribing to Radio Nemo on YouTube.
We celebrate all kinds.
Make it official. After all, if you're listening, you're already in the gang. The Road Gang.
We're absolutely delighted to welcome our next guest. He helps individuals and teams maximize their potential using his experience in the effects of being severely wounded in Iraq. His story is one of recovery and resilience, and he motivates individuals to live well and is a staunch advocate of mental and emotional wellness of the human tribe as a whole. I love that. After a triple-stack tank mine detonated below his vehicle in the Al Anbar province, Iraq, in 2004, our next guest, who we are absolutely thrilled to welcome, Jacob Schick, has engaged in a long journey, a remarkable journey that has brought a lot of healing, solace, and motivation to a lot of Americans out there. We'll unpack his bio as we kind of go through the story, but we want to get right to the point and say, welcome, Jacob. We're glad to have you. Thank you for being here.
Honored to be here. Thank you guys for having me this morning.
You got it. So let's talk a little bit about your service. Let's talk about the impetus to kind of to serve. What happened over there? Because a lot of times people don't like talking about that story. You understand that who you become next is so integrated to that, and what's important to you from a PTSD and recovery standpoint is important to that. So I didn't want to tell the story for you. So tell our listeners a bit about your story.
Essentially, I'm a third-generation combat Marine. After my grandfather fought World War II, my uncle in Vietnam, and ultimately myself in Operation Iraqi Freedom. And I was a school-trained 0311 rifleman, cross-trained 0331 machine gunner, and just had a bad day at work in September of 2004 that resulted in significant injuries, and it was, it ruined my whole day. But it was a REACT mission, which is people in other branches usually refer to it as QRF, Quick Reaction Force, and the Marines call it the REACT. And so it was myself and 9 Marines, and the REACT got called early one morning, and I had a bad feeling in my gut. Something was about to happen, and I truly believe that the bad feelings we have, or those gut feelings we have, or a lot of people refer to them as sixth senses. Well, I believe those are guardian angels. Those are God's guardian angels that he puts around us. And in my case, I felt it and felt like it was my grandfather talking to me from beyond the grave. And I knew we were about to get hit. I didn't know by what or how bad it was going to be. If it was going to be followed by small arms fire, I had no idea. But so I did some things I otherwise wouldn't do, and I just listened to my gut and listened to those outside powers, and ended up taking the bomb blanket from my commanding officer's Humvee. And then on the REACT team, we had 2 two-door soft-top Humvees, and I walked up to the lead vehicle, told the driver to move over to the passenger seat, put the bomb blanket down in the driver's seat, took the radio from the radio man, told all the guys to button up, meaning if they gave it to you for protection, put it on right now. And then got in the driver's seat, and within 3 minutes, we hit a triple-stacked tank mine that was pressure plate ignited, meaning as soon as the pressure from the tire hit the plate goes down, lights the fuse, and the bomb detonated directly beneath me and blew me 30 feet to the top of the Humvee. I stuck the landing with my head because I'm a Marine and we believe in good form. And I like to say, because God's a comedian, I never lost consciousness or went into shock. And it took the Black Hawk 42 minutes to come and extract me out of that hot LZ. And so, like I said, it made for a long day at the office. But I was very grateful for that time, because the Marines got to me and found me, picked me up, carried me to the second vehicle, took me back to the command post where Doc was ready to start working on me. But I got to tell all those Marines that, the Marine bravado went out the window at that point. The tough guy BS went out the window at that point, because I was, my left leg was wrapped around itself. My tibia was exposed. all my ribs were broken. I had multiple compound fractures in my left leg, my left arm. My right leg was broken. I had shrapnel in my neck and in my face, and the only thing that wasn't broken or shattered essentially was my right arm and hand. And so I knew it was bad. But when I was on the deck, when I hit the ground and I started my self-assessment, I realized how bad it was, and just immediately said a prayer to God, and I just said, "Hey, big man, all I ask is that you not take me in front of my brothers. As soon as the skids of the bird leave the deck, I'm all yours. Just please don't allow my family to watch me die here." And so that became my hyper focus. And so when Doc was working on me up there at the command post, yeah, I got to hold the hand of all those Marines, the other 9 Marines, and tell them how much I loved them and what they meant to me, and that they needed to go fight for me, that I was out of the fight. And it was one of those moments that was very bittersweet, and over the years I've thought a lot about, who has it worse? Was it me or those Marines that had to see me that way? And yeah, I really think it was them. It was in a lot of ways it was more mentally and emotionally traumatic for them than it was for me. They have to deal with that and see that vision every time they close their eyes, and smell those smells. And it's one of those things that it's the gifts that keep on giving in a very negative light if you don't address them head on. And that's what I focused on doing. And I ended up leaving there and ended up spending 18 months in the hospital. I've had well over 50 operations, over 20 blood transfusions, and had to do a lot of physical therapy, occupational therapy. And what people need to remember, too, is when you leave a combat zone, it's not like, and we're in a time of war, and at this time, the United States was in 2 active wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. The trauma doesn't stop. The casualties of war are ongoing, and there wasn't a maybe 3-week period for those 18 months that I wasn't in a hospital room paying respects to a flag draped body. And so, it doesn't stop. It's one of those things that it's ever present in your mind no matter what. And then it's ever present visually, because we get treated in military hospitals. And it wasn't long after I got hit that when me and my guys got hit, I was the only one severely wounded by the grace of God. And as the saying goes in the Marine Corps, better me than my Marines. But as months went on, those hospitals filled up real quick because of these IEDs, and our enemy understood that they could not fight and win against us head up. And so, as a coward would do true to form, you find a way where you don't have to do that head up. And so the IEDs became very prevalent, and it became a cat and mouse game. They changed their tactics, we changed ours. They changed theirs, we changed ours. But lo and behold, here we are 21 years later, and I've been able to do a lot of really cool things, and I've had to fight a lot of demons and still have my days. And that's okay, because I'm a fundamentally flawed human, just like everybody else, and it's okay to not be okay. So I think the whole point of this life is doing what we can do to help those around us to not only survive but thrive.
I want a couple of things I want to unpack from there. And Jacob Schick joins us this morning. He, by the way, is the CEO of the One Tribe Foundation, formerly 22 Kill. It's an organization and community that combats suicide by empowering veterans, first responders, law enforcement officers, frontline medical workers, and their families through traditional and non-traditional therapies. And I can tell you something from a little bit of my own experience. You tend to kind of go back and kind of pick through a lot of the things that happened, I'm reminded in a very strange way. I don't know if you know this, when Robert Kennedy was shot, when he was assassinated, he simply kept asking one simple question: is Ethel okay? Is everybody else okay? Has anybody else been hit? And you touched on that in the middle of that, the idea that you said that nobody else that day was seriously wounded, and you pointed out that people, in an indirect way, that people who suffer from PTSD aren't simply people who simply have been wounded in combat in a direct way, but often are the people who look down and see the person they love on the ground. And I had two questions for you. One of which is, how do you extend your commitment to people who didn't feel bad things in regards to shrapnel or bullets or roadside bomb, but in fact saw the results of that? And then number two, you made a point of saying that you told all the men that day that you loved them. Have you kind of held that commitment moving forward, in the thought that every day might be your last, and making sure that the people that you love in your life know that you love them on a regular basis? Because I've had that in my life where, I just will randomly tell people in my life I love them. Not random people, but people I'll tell them randomly that I love them. I mean, can you kind of talk about what it is, One Tribe? Because I'm noticing here that you really are focused on what I would call the shock wave that often ends up happening in catastrophe or trauma. Am I making any sense here, Jacob? There's so much you unpack there.
Yeah. No worries. I'll answer the second question first. Love wins, period. Right? Love will always win. Love will prevail. And as a believer, especially, that's what we're called to do, is to love one another. And in the Marine Corps, especially with the infantry, and you have to have a certain mindset to go do what we do, and because we're already held to a very high standard because of the work that our fathers and our grandfathers and our grandfathers did. Right? I mean, we don't have the reputation that we have around the world because of what we did. It's because of what they did. And we have a full understanding of that. And I think that's why the Marine Corps adheres to tradition so much, is because we're very, very well aware of the fact that we're feared because of the work they did, not what we did. And so I think that makes the younger generations work even harder to uphold that standard that was set long before we ever donned the cloth of the nation. And so for us, it's one of those things where we're tight and we know we're tight, but it's not always expressed in the soul-to-soul connection in the human form. When I think it's too simple to not do it, and I think that all too often we don't open up enough to our humanness. Whereas, you go way back to the time of the Spartans, which, they were the Spartans. This is well before any form of effective communication, albeit like telegrams or phones, or let alone social media or the internet. And the Spartans were feared around the world. So the fact that there was no way to effectively communicate tells you that they were very effective warriors and gladiators. But at the time of the Spartan, it was mandatory after every battle that they come together and mourn their losses. And so what I ask a lot of people, a lot of the time when I'm presenting or do public speaking stuff, or even in meetings, is I say, how have we regressed so much since the time of the Spartan? We've actively regressed as a human society to be more closed in, less opened up. We no longer understand that it makes a better gladiator and a better human to find victory in his or her vulnerability while refusing to be a hostage to their pride. Yeah, that's how we live day to day. And we don't understand that that's impeding our ability to grow forward. And so for me, any chance I get to express my love for the people at the tribe, or the people that we work with, or especially my family, my wife and my sons, This is a house of love, and that's what it always will be. And because, when you have more than one thumb war with the Grim Reaper, and you realize just how fragile life is, it's very important. It's very important to know that, hey, listen, when God pulls my card, it's not always going to be up for negotiation. I need to be fully present, and I need to love all the way, because it could be over at any given moment. Because at the end of the day, this whole life is about loving yourself and loving others in order to live well. And so hopefully that answers the second question. And then the first question, not everybody that you see that served in our military, even over the years of the conflicts in Iraq and Afghanistan, have physical wounds, right? And a lot of people think that, the TV, people that watch the TV and see the commercials, that, every third man or woman that served is in a wheelchair, has scars or missing limbs. And that's just not the case. There's actually not a whole bunch of us. We're actually a relatively small number in comparison to the amount of personnel that served in those two conflicts. But seeing is believing, right? In the TV and a lot of the commercials, people will see men and women in wheelchairs with scars and prosthetics, and it's like, yeah, but that's not the majority. The majority don't have a scratch on them, but they definitely still have the scars in their brain, right? And the brains that we're born with, that's the one you get. There's no prosthetic for that. And so you have to do the work. You have to do the work on yourself and on your soul and on your heart to be able to love all the way and be fully present. Because I spent a long time, I would be home, and I was there physically, but I wasn't there mentally and emotionally. And it took me a long time to really submit to my own pride and my own ego to say, hey, you can't do this alone. You're not strong enough to do that. And that was a big thing, right? Because at my core, I'm a fighter. And I don't want to admit defeat in anything. And I'm a competitor. I was a competitor long before I was a gladiator. And it's just one of those things that we have to come to grips with it and understand that the one thing we can't forget in our lives, regardless of what our title is, for whatever profession it may be, we're always, always, always going to be human first. That's never, ever, ever going to be removed from the equation. And so we have to respect the fact that we're human first. And so the scars that you can't see are oftentimes the ones that make people implement a permanent solution to a temporary problem that leaves a wake in other people's lives that's generational. And so we do the work as well as we can with the resources we have to help these men and women understand that they don't have to fight these demons alone, that there's a lot of men and women just like them that have been through these battles, and they just need to understand, and the listeners need to understand, look, as human beings, we're herd animals. We're not meant to do this life thing alone. We're not meant to fight these battles alone. We got to lean in and love hard in order to live well.
Let's talk a little bit about the One Tribe Foundation, because so much of what you've already talked about with the Spartans and gathering together, and by the way, you may have already read it. There's a wonderful book out there that I recommend to a lot of people called Achilles in Vietnam, where he looks at, the nature of PTSD and ways of reintegrating people into community. So much of what you are focused on is reintegration. The Vikings, a lot of people don't know this, but after particularly savage battles, Vikings would be brought back and they would be put into basically a cold dip, what we now call a cold dip. Then they would be rolled in ashes, and then they would be then dipped into a hot, warm bath and then kind of dried off and kind of reintegrated back into the community. In some ways, what the goal seems like, and please correct me if I'm wrong, it's a matter of not being like, we're not going to fix everything, we're not going to heal everything, but we're going to figure out a way to get you back. We're going to walk with you on that road to kind of reintegrate you and reintroduce you to the tribe, to bring you back to the community. And that seems to be kind of the foundational thought behind One Tribe. I'd love you to tell us a a little bit more about the program.
Essentially, that's definitely a large facet of it, is because, you hear a lot about, well, what will be a seamless transition from X job in military to X job in the civilian sector. And regardless of what people may think, said seamless transition doesn't exist. Right? That's an anomaly. It doesn't exist because the government does a tremendous job at training us on the front end to do what we do very effectively in the military for the United States. Well, once we're done with said job, we don't get an eighth of the training on the way out to be an effective civilian as we do on the way in. So we're drastically underprepared to come back to a civilian society that absolutely does not have the same mindset and points of view that we've got. And so therein lies a lot of problems and a lot of issues. And so the reintegration aspect is something that is a big aspect. It's a big part of what we do. But it's no different for us than it is the banker that works for 30 years as a banker, or as a teacher that works for 30 years as a teacher and then retires and then doesn't really know who they are because they wrapped up their identity in their profession. And it's the same goes for professional athletes that, as we know, like in the NFL, for example, which also stands for not for long, you leave that field, you leave that locker room. Well, then who are you now?
Junior Seau. Junior Seau is the poster boy for that. I mean, the sadness of that story, Jacob, the idea what happened at the end, that he never even realized he was playing football at such an intense level, he didn't even realize he was bipolar because he was essentially giving himself unintentional cognitive therapy. And once the football game stopped, so did he.
Yeah, Junior Seau was a tremendous, not only athlete, but human being.
Yeah.
I'm sure you've probably seen it, but that special that they did on him, it was heart-wrenching, right? It was gut-wrenching, too, to watch and to see his son and his kids talk about how early on he was this amazing present father that was always there, and then he just started to slowly but surely turn into somebody else. And at the end of the day, it wasn't because of Junior's character or lack of integrity. It was because he had significant brain damage.
Yeah.
And he had these diagnoses that when they go unaddressed, drastic things happen. And it's not indicative of that person's character or who they are at their core. It's a mental illness. And in this country, we have a really easy way of labeling people.
Right.
For whatever reason, it's very hard for individuals to empower people. And for whatever reason, I'll just call the is mainly because most people have a very hard time looking in the mirror and being completely in love with the person looking back at them. And everything in our lives begin and end with how we feel when we look in the mirror. And so that's ultimately what we're trying to do, is we're trying to get these men and women and these families to know when you look in the mirror, you've got to be completely in love with the person looking back at you. That has to be first. And then and only then can we go and be force multipliers for the greater good and develop a community and get people to come together.
We're going to have to end it here, Jacob. We are absolutely out of time. I cannot thank you enough. The #1, tribefoundation.org. If you want to find Jacob, you can find him as an individual, an amazing story at Jacob, SCHICK, www.jacobschick.com. I'm going to say that again when we come back on the other side of the break. Jacob, I say this a lot to people because I mean it. You're welcome back anytime. I wanted to ask you really quickly, what's the next big event you guys got coming up? Is there anything you want to turn our listeners' attention to make sure that people are aware of what you guys are up to and what you're up to?
Sure, and I appreciate the time. It means a lot. Been honored to do it. We have our 10th annual 22 Kill One Tribe ride coming up in November. So anybody that wants to head to the North Texas area and join us in that ride, we think it's going to be a great ride. We're expecting a lot of motorcycles, and it's one of those things where people can come together. We can have fellowship and camaraderie and just have a really good time riding some motorcycles and getting some wind therapy. And we would love anyone and everyone to show up. So go to our website and check out, sign up. And anybody that feels the need and wants to support, just know that we tremendously appreciate it and we're very humbled by it. And again, thank you guys so much. Really appreciate you. And thank you for the opportunity.
And by the way, Jacob, anybody who has got a wind therapy specialist on their staff is well worth checking out. The man sitting across me that produces this show is, in fact, an avid motorcycle rider. So we are already kind of digging in over there. Thank you so much, Jacob. And thanks for making the time.
You bet, guys. Semper Fi. God bless.
One Tribe Foundation's Wind Therapy program focuses on introducing veterans, first responders, and spouses to the therapeutic benefits of motorcycle riding. We'll talk more about this after this.